You cited the scene in Matchstick Men where Roy comes home, he's getting ready to start his new con, and he's surprised to find his daughter there as a particularly strong scene for you for that movie. I mean, how important was that scene to the rest of the story or writing that script?
I think I picked that one because it's emblematic of the whole movie in that you've established Roy, Nick Cage's character, as obsessive compulsive and a clean freak and having no real personal relationships in his life, and this is the first night where he's got to start this big con, and in comes Angela, Alison Lohman's character, and so it's not necessarily, I think, the best scene
there's a lot going on,
but it's sort of like that's where all the movie kind of comes together. Of here he's got to balance the con and the daughter and an outside force in his sort of inner sanctum. And I think that scene is in the book. I haven't read it long enough to know like how much, but I always sort of sense that if that scene didn't gel, that was an indication of everything before it not necessarily being where it is.
How did you approach the writing of it? Do you decide what the plot of the scene is first, or the theme, or what's going on physically, or?
I think you start off instinctively of just sort of because I think if you intellectualize it, if you analyze it going in.
You could kill it before it starts.
Yeah, that line about analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. No one enjoys it, and the frog dies. I think if you sort of, if you start off by saying, well, I want to make a movie that's really about man's inhumanity to man, it's like, well, I usually have to start with story, and then I think the most important thing about writing is during that process coming upon the clarity and I don't want to say simplicity, but but I'll say simplicity of what the movie is really about. And this doesn't come out very well in the film, I think, but in Ocean's 11, I think I was on page 100 before I realized this is the story about a guy pulling off a ludicrous heist simply to show his wife that he loves, his ex-wife that he loves.
So that was a late in the process?
Yeah, it was sort of like, but I started off like, oh, this is a big heist movie. And they'll be, okay, and here's the girl. But then I thought, okay, this is actually what it's about.
Two of the most memorable scenes for me in that film are when Brad Pitt realizes there's an ulterior motive, and he says to George Clooney, "We can't split her 9 ways." You know? And then the scene later in the movie when George Clooney goes, "Does he make you laugh?" And she goes, "Well, he doesn't make me cry." In any movie about a relationship or a love story, those would be standout scenes. But you married it to a heist plot, which is great because you're saying the love story really leapt out late in the writing process.
Yeah, it's also I think there was some inspiration from that on from the movie David Lynch movie Straight Story. There was something inspiring about that in which you get what your the protagonist is doing through the whole movie, and in the last 20 seconds you understand why he's doing it, like on a whole deeper level. And I think after I realized that was what Ocean's 11 was about, I went back and just made sure that that was sort of clarified that through the movie.
So you backtracked it after.
Yeah,
it left
but I think I almost think if I started out writing that, then I almost would have fucked up the rest of it.
Oh, that's interesting. Going back to Roy and that scene in Matchstick Men, did you have any surprises in the writing of that script in terms of, oh, hey, this is about this now, or was it pretty much always what it was going to be?
I think Roy's psychology got deeper and deeper as we went. Both my brother and I are a little crazy, and have a relationship a little bit like Roy and Frank, Sam Rockwell's character in it. And so I think the farther we got into it, the more specific Roy became. And then when Nick Cage came on, it got real specific. Nick added a lot. Nick Cage, sorry, not my brother, added a lot of minutia almost to Roy's.
Was he your first choice always?
Yeah, pretty much. Yaphet Kotto was sort of always in talks, but
he was busy.
Yeah.
Were there challenges to writing that scene with Roy discovering the daughter? Like,
writing Angela was sort of tough.
Was the book a help? Did any?
Yeah, and the book is a help, and I think it's a good book, and sometimes it's a help to say, okay, there's some scenes from the book where it's just we were typing, and there's some scenes where you go, okay, that doesn't quite work with what we're doing, but it's almost good to have something to
someone else's attempt at something.
I mean, it's always, I think, easier to rewrite than to face a blank page.
Is adapting for another medium more difficult than rewriting either your own script or someone else's script?
Adapting from another medium can be as difficult as writing original, depending on what your source material is. because if it's really schematic, then you're pretty much inventing. But Matchstick Men was, I think, easier in some ways because there was so much material already there that I thought was working quite well. And then there were some big things that we had to sort of flesh out. And our first draft, we actually went 180 degrees away from the book because the book has the sort of the larger con. And when I got to the end of the book, I thought, I might have had a sense this was coming, and this is a downer. And actually, I just had an interest in writing a Robert Benton movie that was emotional. So our first draft was take that con out and make it a what we called, I think, a Clint Eastwood like screen door movie where you felt like it was just you were just doing a straight movie about crooked people. It ended up being a crooked movie about crooked people, but our first draft was we're just going to do a Kramer versus Kramer, straight down the middle, emotional drama that happens to be about con men.
Do you think you'll be adapting more books in the future? Do you like that process?
Yeah, I like doing it.
Did Nick find that book first, or did you guys find
it
it
we got
together?
to send it at the same time.
Okay.
We had the same agent, and so that's how that came about.
When you write, do you do anything outside the screenplay to help you? Do you do character bios, or do you go outside just like writing the script in terms of preparation?
It sort of matters what. Like on Ocean's 11, there wasn't a whole lot of kind of having to sink down into the real grit of what Danny Ocean was about.
Was that fun? Because it was just like it looked like characters just no arcs. Everybody's like their own people.
Fuck you, man. You know? It's subtle, but it's there.
Okay.
No, it's a lot of fun there because they're.
Brad's wardrobe was to die for.
Yeah, it was. Michael Kaplan, nice job. There's sort of a different craft, I think, between writing a fully grown character, like I think I would.
Yeah.
I'll use Roy Waller, Nick Cage's character as an example, and a movie star role, which I would say Danny Ocean or Rusty Ryan, George and Brad are. And actually, and I wouldn't necessarily say that the movie star one is necessarily easier. It can be a little more fun.
Right.
But
it's different.
But it's sort of like it's a different kind of craft.
Right.
So for Roy Waller, for that character, there was a lot sort of sinking into it and viewing every scene through his eyes, whereas with Danny or Rusty, it was kind of coming up with the best gesture. It was sort of, I saw somewhere recently that like Steve McQueen would practice opening a car door like 50 times before doing a scene, and
that kind of attention to style.
And it works. I mean, that's why he's a great movie star. He's not necessarily wasn't the greatest actor, but it's a craft into itself, and I think totally worthwhile. Not to demean it at all. And with Oceans, it was sort of trying to get the cool down for those guys. And then also for the Carl Reiner and Elliot Gould roles, sort of coming up with, not necessarily fleshed out because they're secondary characters.
Do you think those kind of movies, back in the 70s or even before, do you think that the studios were better at making fluff that was good and had quality? Were they better at it back then than we seem to be, or not you? They seem to be now?
I don't know because I was in an executive capacity back in the 70s. What have I said?
You've seen old films. I know you rent DVDs and watch them.
I'm curious what you think about this too, because
that's like a lament. Everyone's like, oh, things were better back in the day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of shit that was made back then. There are a lot of bad movies that were made in the 70s too.
People forget, we just remember the classics, but that whole, any given year, 75, 78, there were like 30 movies behind the one we remember that were just as bad, probably.
I think maybe in that landscape, I'm not sure how confused the studio was. There was some sort of fear because it wasn't the 50s where they were losing everything to TV, and so they threw everything at
This was a true sea change in people's taste. And they just,
well,
what I've noticed is, that what used to be B movies, and B movies can be fun, are like now today's like A pictures, and there seems to be less room to do a Matchstick Men now, or even with the attachments, it's like it used to be people wanted 5 10-pole movies a year to hold up the rest. 10-pole used to mean the pole that holds up the tent, and the 10 was the rest of the slate.
Now February is 10-pole.
All pole. Now it's everybody wants 10 10-poles and 15 10-poles, and that is a little bit of the conglomerate effect on things. And
I think there are some B movies that are done with A-list people that are done perfectly well. And I'm wondering how much there's an attitude within studios of we can get our tentpole movies for a little cheaper, without naming names. There are just some movies that feel like that were sort of cut price tentpoles, and that became profitable, and there are no back end players, and so it's all better for it's bottom line better for.
Well, I guess that can backfire on you if you go cheap with the first film and what could have been a franchise. You kind of make sure there's no number 2, 3, 4, 5, which is
you kill the golden goose. Yeah. You have a reputation from New Line as having been somewhat maverick-ish, and I'm curious, what was your attitude going into your job at New Line, because you did take a lot of risks and.
You know, it was a necessity with us. We couldn't afford to spend over a certain amount or have big movie stars, so you had to find material that could work in the marketplace without those stars and that kind of production value and budget. So, in a way, it was good that we were forced to do that because. You know, I think the movies are better once we got a lot of money. You know, and all it went crazy for a while.
Well, okay, let's take Seven, which is not an obvious studio movie and not a everything ends well and not a pick me up, not a date movie. How much did you spend making it?
That was $33 million. That movie cost $33 million back in the day. Brad was $4 million.
Okay. How scared were you of making that movie at the time? Because that's a movie that harkens back to, I think, the 70s sort of adventurous film.
I don't know if we were scared, but I remember my boss coming out of the first screening of it just muttering like, it's a $33 million art film, it's a $33 million art film. Because it's a cop movie with no car chases, you know, none of the traditional. Andy Kevin Walker, who wrote it, turned every convention kind of on its head. But there was a sneaking suspicion that the script's provocativeness would help it survive in the marketplace. And it is fun to catch talent on the way up, right at that right time, you know, before it becomes so expensive. And that's
when Freeman was young and just out of acting
before he was God as a voice.
You should have done more voiceover at the end about
Well, then we'll go back. Now, given his stature, we'll go back and re-record a whole new track. Put a little Blade Runner action on it.
That was actually one of the scripts I read when I was struggling. That Andy Kevin Walker, and I read it before the movie. That I thought this is pretty much word for word perfect.
Okay. Now, do you make it a point of reading other writers' works in town? And
I try to, because you get sent a lot of stuff to rewrite, but it's not great. That's why you're getting sent it, and so sort of to get almost sort of stimulated, not necessarily competitively, but just to know what is being done with good screenwriting. I think. So if you
hear a script is great, do you go try to get it and just see what's up?
Yeah, I haven't heard it much lately. The script I wrote with a friend Sean Bailey, which I wrote 10 years ago, and is that close to production right now.
Oh, is that Solace?
That's Solace, the one that is kind of teetering on whether it'll get made right now. But
now that script's been around and been praised for years and years and years. What has been the problem with describe what that movie's about?
It's
in 5 words or less.
7, but different.
7 meets.
7 meets.
My dog Skip.
Something that's derivative of 7. No.
Was it written before 7 though?
No.
Okay. Thank you for being honest.
Yeah. But what happened was, because I think you were gone, but New Line bought it, and
I was just leaving.
And they sent it to Fincher as a possible sequel to 7.
I do remember this. Yeah.
Did you do this?
No, I remember being told about it.
Okay, because this was because they sent it to Fincher, who instantly passed. They sent it to Morgan Freeman and said, "We'll pay you more money than you've ever made before to reprise Somerset and play this role in this movie." And Fincher called him up and said, "Don't fucking do it," and he passed. But something I admired about the creative integrity of actually trying to kill a sequel to your best movie without for the best reasons. Because I do think it would have, not that I'm not proud of Solace, it was an odd fit to be crammed in as a sequel to 7.
So Solace is a serial killer thriller, and you were saying it was just about to get made.
Or right now, like they're probably somebody's phoning somebody about it.
And do we call that a blinking green light or a yellow light or elevated
green light that's got a filter,
like a David Lynchian green light.
Yeah, and somebody's got the plug in their hand, like waiting for a signal.
Gotcha. Now, is that frustrating? You know, not specifically that project, but you know, everyone I guess realizes that so many things have to line up to get a movie made, and it's a wonder anything ever happens. But when you're right there and it's about to go, and then something screws up, you know, how do you deal with that?
I think you're always holding your breath, like something. Somebody's going to get ill, or somebody's going to have just a bad reaction to something, or wake up one day and go, you know what, no. And actually, in that scenario, I haven't had like anything like this where we were 5 weeks from starting production, and then somebody got a little started backing out.
Since writing is such a solitary process, was working with your brother or any partner, is that easier? Is it more difficult? Is it?
It gets tricky when you have a difference of opinion.
Right.
It gets really tricky when you have a difference of opinion and you're in the same family. I guess you do have to say it's only a movie.
Right.
But
would you write with a partner again, family member or not?
Yeah, I think so. But it would under a specific. So I wrote with Sean Bailey, but that was sort of 10 years ago.
Have you ever rewritten other people's screenplays? Are you in that script doctor category of writers?
I've done it a few times. As I've done a couple of rewrites when the movie is actually shooting, and there's something very liberating about that because you don't have to worry about the development process of the studio notes and so forth. The
work is very specific, what they ask.
It's like grab ammo and bring it to the front line because we need it now, and therefore it's all the bullshit is cleared out, and it really becomes just about what is going to work when we shoot this in 5 days.
And have you been happy with the work you've done in that?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, you have to sort of. It comes down mostly to sort of who you're working with and whether your tastes align and whether you have the same idea.
Where do you find inspiration for the things you write?
Books, not scripts, and not watching movies, but probably thinking about movies. I think when you go to sort of watch a movie and think, okay, I want to do something that's like Raiders, and you watch it, I think that actually stunts the imagination. But actually, if you just movies are I think if you're a movie lover, you enjoy kind of remembering movies sometimes even more than sort of revisiting them. Or they're certainly, I think, better in memory than when you revisit some things. Do you
can you watch your favorite movies over and over again, or do you get tired of them at a certain point?
Yeah, there are some things that I've sort of run into the ground by watching, and some things that I mean, I guess just going back to Deliverance now, as a kid, I never understood why they wanted to bury the dead hillbilly and just go tell the police. I thought, that's stupid. They should just go tell the cops. And now I totally understand why they're not going to tell
Well, that movie in particular, you take more from it as an adult than you do as a child.
Yeah, for reasons. No spoilers.
We have a little exercise for you that I think is going to greatly benefit your chance of getting a movie on screen next year.
Vinyasana?
It's called The Object. Norris, the tray. We have an object carefully chosen by us on this tray. You will look at the object. You will invent a story about the object. And then you'll tell us why your story was your story.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
You got it?
Your object, sir.
I'm screwed. Thank you. Wow. It's a good piece. I keep on like getting stuck on somehow a guy is not handcuffed but sort of locked to the grate at the bottom of a swimming pool with this, and the key is like halfway up the slope to the shallow end, and there's water pouring. It's an empty swimming pool, but there's water pouring in, and so you have a set piece of this guy. I don't know how he got locked there.
Well, that's interesting. So you went right to a thriller scenario. You went to a guy locked down to the bottom of the swimming pool.
Well, this is, I think, too sort of atavistic. No, it just doesn't look comedic, this lock.
No, you picked the right genre. I think.
It looks like either horror or some sort of.
I went thriller.
Or some sort of period action.
Like a Pirates thing?
Like a Pirates thing or a National Treasure.
Do you ever free associate like that in terms of coming up with your own ideas?
On occasion, I've tried to do something where I'll force myself to sort of stand in a room and try to come up with some situation where, not to turn it into a script, but just to kind of create a situation and then try to build on it. And I guess going back to the swimming pool, I had one where there's like that I just thought of a groom and the best man are outside by a pool, and they're about to get in the car to go to the church for the guy to get married, and the groom is giving the best man his ring that he's got to give him to in the ceremony, and the best man bottles it and goes into the deep end of the pool. And so here they are in their suits, and it's sort of like okay, what do you do then?
Right.
And then like just try to build on it. I mean, there's no movie in that, or not a good one. but you can run with it if you like.
Well,
take it into Amy.
This exercise reminds me of how hard it is to show the writer's process visually to people that aren't familiar with how a writer does it because they're not writers themselves. I keep thinking of that scene from World According to Garp, which it's about a writer that obviously that genre right now is about Garp, who's a writer. But the way they tried to visualize it in that movie is Robin Williams is turning a corner and sees a guy and a piano hanging in the window, and then they reenact his short story about the magic gloves and playing the piano. And in a really good movie, that is the one cripplingly corny sequence because it's very hard to show. Yeah. You know what goes on in a writer's mind. The profession of writing used to be, I think, the most uncinematic profession. Now I think it's anybody working on the internet or at a computer. That's dollar, actually, of like, click, as opposed to somebody typing. Aren't there programs that will write the script for you, basically, almost? If you plug in genre and a few like key elements, it'll spit out a screenplay or something? Where is this available? Is it online, or, I mean... It's not like crack. You can't start abusing it. Oh, that's too bad. I'll find a way.